Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martyn Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Aotearoa, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora Aotearoa. The true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal, progressive democracy is the 1% richest, plus their 9% enablers, versus the 90% rest of us. Welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are Green Party MP Steve Abel, Auckland Mayoralty candidate Kerrin Leoni, business desk journalist Maria Slade, and New Zealand Herald columnist Simon Wilson. Tonight's 1-on-1 in 10 is former Prime Minister and UN Development Administrator Helen Clark, who we cross to now to discuss the ramifications of New Zealand's decision to refuse recognising Palestine. Kia ora, Helen. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Thank you.
Helen, you are one of our nation's most important voices on international affairs, and we need your wisdom more now than ever before. By refusing to recognise Palestine, this government has put us on the wrong side of history, while critics argue the decision effectively has New Zealand protecting war criminals while ignoring genocide. New Zealand has a long history of making moral stands on the international stage. Why has this government betrayed our collective mana on this issue?
It's hard to know why they've let us down, Martyn, because none of the arguments they put up made any sense at all. They somehow equated Hamas still having some kind of control in Gaza from their bunker with the entire governance of Palestine. Now, Palestine has a government. It's called the Palestinian Authority, and it operates on the West Bank. So to refuse to recognise State of Palestine because a part of the State of Palestine has Hamas still in some kind of control from a bunker just doesn't make sense at all. Look, the overwhelming majority of the world's countries have now recognised the State of Palestine.
Yes.
I thought that when Australia, Canada and the United Kingdom moved together, that might at least give the New Zealand government the cover it was presumably looking for. Heaven knows who Winston Peters consulted in New York. It certainly wasn't anyone who was making any sense on the issue. So here we are. It reminds me, Martyn, of that terrible time in the 1970s when African nations boycotted, I think it was the 1976 Montreal Olympics.
That's right. Because
New Zealand was there and the government of New Zealand's official position was to support apartheid sport. This is how bad it feels to me.
The government's argument, Helen, is that Palestine doesn't meet the benchmark as a state because they haven't had an election and don't control all their territory. How solid do you think that argument is?
No, not at all. Firstly, the Palestinian Authority does have elections, and the president of the authority has said that they are very prepared to go to elections again, and they've made a number of undertakings about improving governance. But I think it was Audrey Young in the Herald who said that the stance of the New Zealand government now almost equates with what you would do recognising a state, emerging 60 years ago. It doesn't take into account the current realities. Now, the current realities are that you have Israel, which has been continuously under Netanyahu blocking a two-state solution. So here we are recognising one-state Israel, but unlike most countries, refusing to recognise the other state, which would be in the two-state solution. Now, the elders grouping, which I'm a member of, we said many months ago that recognition should be seen as a transformative step towards the two-state solution.
Yeah.
recognition shouldn't be dependent on two states materializing. So it was really to give momentum to a process. But this seems to completely elude the current New Zealand government.
If New Zealand won't call out our allies when they commit atrocities, what's the point of having a voice?
Well, what is the point of having a voice if you say nothing much when a genocide is unfolding? But look, the famine is there in Gaza City, which they're now trying to clear and destroy the remaining infrastructure of. They bombed a university campus in Gaza in the last couple of days for no apparent reason. The reason always given is, oh, Hamas was there. Well, they've flattened just about every building in the place under that excuse that, there's not that many of them to be under every building. So, no, look, Israel is not an ally. It is standing now for a set of values which I think are abhorrent to most New Zealanders. Most people see Gaza burning. They see the suffering of the people. They see the starvation. The UN Commission, a very credible commission, which reported recently, was adamant that 4 of the 5 tests for genocide have been met. Now, in the end, the International Court of Justice will make a determination on whether genocide has occurred. But that judgment is not expected for more than 2 years. And by then, if you don't stop the bloodshed, you could have double the number of people dead that we see today, which is already atrocious enough. So at the Elders, we have talked about an unfolding genocide, and we know that in the Genocide Convention, it is the convention on the prevention and punishment of genocide. If you see a genocide unfolding, as a state, you have a responsibility to work to prevent that.
Right.
And I see New Zealand doing far too little.
President Trump told US media that if Hamas did not accept his peace deal within 72 hours, that he would obliterate them. What hope do you think for the Palestinians of seeing a meaningful ceasefire in this terrible war right now? Do you think we'll get one?
So I think we're probably already past his 3 or 4 day limit. But I think that President Trump is very focused on this at the moment, and that's good. And I think what pushed him over the edge was when Israel bombed Qatar. Now, the US has a major Air Force base on Qatar. It regards Qatar as a good friend. And Qatar was bombed. They were trying to kill the negotiators for Hamas. Someone took them off, and looks like they didn't kill any of them at all. But they did kill some people, including, I understand, a Qatari national. Qataris are absolutely furious. So when President Trump had Netanyahu in his office a week or so back, he made him talk on the phone to the Prime Minister of Qatar and offer his apology. So I think Trump has had enough. He wants to be seen as someone who can bring about an end to disputes. If he can pull this off, good on it. Because only the United States
has the power,
can force Israel to the table. That's the reality. So there are talks going on in Cairo again today. Israel and Hamas don't sit in the same room, but they talk to people who scurry between the rooms. And there's supposed to be the deal being worked out for the release of the remaining live hostages and of the bodies. Now, what Hamas will be worried about is that if they give over the hostages and the bodies, that Israel will resume bombing. And it's going to take a lot of pressure from the US to keep Israel to the course on what follows the release.
Report after report after report from inside Israel shows their young men and women who have served in this appalling conflict are plagued with PTSD and waves of suicide. When you commit terrible violence, it impacts not just those you target, but it also damages the hearts and minds of those who commit that violence. What long-term hope is there to heal that level of pain?
So it's worth following on, say, Instagram, the brave voices of people like Breaking the Silence, who speak for former reservists who speak out and give testimony to what they saw and what they were required to do, whether in the detention centres or on the field or just in the war zones. There's another one, Combatants for Peace, which does a great job. The Haaretz newspaper is doing a great job of reporting that what's actually happening. And there is a lot of opposition in Israel to what is happening, very large marches of people. But yes, I mean, this will be a very, very scarred country after what has happened. There's been a number of Gaza wars before, but this is the longest level and the most horrific.
Yeah. The Lancet and independent researchers suggest the actual total death toll of the Palestinians may be in the hundreds of thousands from indirect violence, with almost all buildings destroyed, mass displacement and enormous emotional trauma. When do you think we'll get a true image of the wound this conflict has left on the Palestinians?
Well, let's hope at some point we do get a full reckoning. We may never know. You would have to have families come forward to say, in more peaceful conditions, to say, we haven't seen our brother for X years, X months, X weeks. There's been no body. We're reporting him as missing. So you really need a toll of those who have been registered as deceased, and of all the missing. And if you're missing now, you aren't alive in all likelihood.
Right.
So I would expect the death toll would most certainly exceed the figures that we see at the moment.
Wow. If a peace deal can be settled, what needs to happen immediately after that from the UN?
So what needs to happen is the place needs to be flooded with food and medical and other humanitarian supplies. Mm-hmm. Actually, Gaza used to have a well-functioning market system.
Yes.
Merchants would buy and the bakeries operated and so on. So the sooner you can get stuff back on that basis rather than people having to beg, the better. And then, of course, with the hostage release needs to go the prisoner exchange. Now, there's talk of hundreds of Palestinian detainees being released.
Yes.
Israel seems to be hanging out on a couple of the most senior ones. And one of them, Marwan Barghouti, a very senior PLO person, is seen by many as a potential future leader of the state of Palestine. Right. No wonder they don't want to let him go.
Right.
So really the pressure has to go on for people who can play a role. And he has the potential, in my opinion, and I have spoken to his wife and son on a phone call with the elders, he has the opinion to be the Mandela of Palestine if he comes out, because the current leadership in the authority, as we know, is quite elderly.
Yes.
This man is not so old, but he has been very badly treated in jail. We don't really have the full story about how well he is at the moment. So anyway, they need to release, a lot of people from those detention centers in Israel, including these potential leaders. And then,
yes,
so then
please.
You need to get on. Then you need to get on to Israel actually withdrawing. So in the Trump plan, there are different lines of withdrawal, and there has to be withdrawal from the territory of Gaza. Now it looks like Israel is still hanging out to keep some kind of buffer zone.
Yeah.
Now, what I saw the one time I went to Gaza was that the buffer zone is also what the agricultural land was in. Israel has destroyed the agricultural land, but if Gaza is to grow its own food again, it needs that land back.
Yeah.
But then, security for both Palestine and Israel depends on a peace process which is implemented. They got close to it after the Oslo Accords in the 90s. That solution is still sitting there, and that needs to be activated.
It would be remiss of me to have you on the show and not to acknowledge that you've just been appointed to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, a public-private partnership that does more than any other organisation to get vaccines to people in poor countries. It's reported that Gavi's vaccine saved a record-breaking 1.7 million people in 2024. That's 400,000 more lives saved than in 2023, enough to produce some 20 billion in economic benefits through reduced healthcare costs and healthier, more productive populations. How excited are you at the malaria vaccine and its potential to save lives?
So, I mean, this Gavi board is a big deal. This is a fund that's been set up 25 years ago. It's just had its 5-yearly replenishment. It raised $9 billion. It had hoped for 12, but these are tough times.
Sure.
You know, America used to pay 13% of the budget, and it's paying nothing. But Gavi aims to get vaccination to every child. And it's done an incredible job. I think 1.2 billion children vaccinated since it began, an estimated 20 million lives saved because of that. There's still close to 15 million children out there who have had not a single vaccination dose, not for, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, you name it, the basic life course childhood diseases. So they are a top target. And then there's, I understand, probably another 5 million children who, while they've had some doses, haven't had the comprehensive loaded dose. So they're the top priority. But as you say, Martyn, there is a lot of excitement about this malaria vaccine. That's a game changer. Because you can do so much, with bed nets and so on. But bed nets wear out, and it's one thing to distribute once. You've got to keep doing it. So that's very exciting. I mean, another very exciting vaccine is this lenacapavir, which can, if administered, I understand, every 6 months, pretty much protect people from HIV transmission.
Oh, wow.
And administered to the adolescent girl in Africa. That would be a game changer, because they are the most at-risk group of demographic group in the world from HIV transmission.
Finally, Helen, what role should New Zealand play in the healing process after this dreadful war in Gaza? Could New Zealand be a place where we fund peace maraes, where Palestinian and Israeli youth could come, meet and understand one another? Because internal polling suggests a majority of Israelis want Gaza wiped out altogether, while many Palestinians are still enraged by the occupation used against them. Isn't this a multi-generational wound they are facing? And should a peaceful country like New Zealand step up to provide a place of healing?
Well, I mean, it's a long way to bring people, obviously, but I think we should be looking at doing whatever we can to repair the damage that's been done. Now, UNICEF, for example, does a lot with psychosocial support for children and children under 18. So look at which of the agencies out there, could be Save the Children, could be any number of them, who is doing this kind of work. There have been over the years valiant peacekeeping efforts between Palestinians and Israelis. I've met the representatives of one which is called, I think, the Circle of the Bereaved, or Family Circle. And that for years has brought together Israelis and Palestinians who lost children in these recurrent conflicts. An Israeli whose son was killed by Palestinians, a Palestinian whose son was killed by Israelis. These parents have come together to say, we've had enough. We want to work for peace. We're all victims here. We're all losing. So anything we can do to support the voices for peace and reconciliation, we should do. We've had a bit of experience with the Treaty of Waitangi processes and what we've done here. Far from perfect, of course, and under a lot of pressure at the moment. But we know the power of reconciliation for good.
Thank you, Helen. Your wisdom means so much in these really dark times. We look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Bye now.
Kia ora. Coming up is the political panel All-Stars, but before that is this week's War on News. Brothers and sisters, this week, Prime Minister Chris Luxon decided to do what the National Party have always done when polls are dropping, and that is to bash the dirty, filthy bennies by forcing 18 and 19-year-olds off welfare and calling that tough love. When asked where are these teenagers are supposed to get jobs, the PM claimed that businesses were calling out for young workers. When contacted by media about those claims, businesses said, no, we're not, we're barely staying afloat as it is. Bashing the dirty, filthy Benny is always a vote winner when the economy fails, and Chris Luxon is so weak he needs to bash teenagers on benefits to look tough. Telling unemployed teenagers that the world doesn't owe you a living is all fine and dandy, but he's also the Prime Minister who has destroyed 6,000 jobs in retail and hospo while destroying 20,000 in the construction. The world doesn't owe anyone a living, but equally, where are they supposed to get a job when he's so busy destroying them? This isn't tough love, it's manufactured righteousness. Talking of manufactured righteousness, opening oil and gas exploration, despite all the major players, Chevron, State Oil, Petrobras and OMV, all handing in their licenses because they found nothing, is not an energy solution. There hasn't been a new major oil or gas find in 20 years, and even if they do manage to find something, it won't be online for 16 years. All Matua Jones has done is put together a $200 million subsidy for the bloody oil and gas industry. We should be putting that $200 million into solar panels on every state house, hospital, school, library and marae. Shane Jones has more chance of finding a mower than new oil and gas fields. And finally, in this week's War on News, new research out today shows that carbon offsets failed to cut global heating due to intractable systemic problems. The research shows the failure of carbon offsets to cut planet heating pollution is, quote, not due to a few bad apples, but down to deep-seated systemic problems that incremental change will not solve. The truth is that we have been lying to ourselves in the hope that climate change just goes away. Apparently, bringing your own shopping bags to the supermarket won't do anything after all. Brothers and sisters, we're all going to die on a burning planet thanks to the lies of the petro-industrial complex and their polluter mates. To quote the great warrior poet oracle Mike Hosking, happy days. Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is a Green Party politician from the House of Gryffindor. He and I once put a pirate radio antenna on top of the Marsden A power station up north and broadcast interviews with politicians demanding they shut it down, which they did. He's the spokesperson for agriculture, animal welfare, food safety, just transitions, Māori Crown relations, racing, resources and Treaty of Waitangi negotiations. Green Party List MP Steve Abel. Kia ora, comrade.
Kia ora.
Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
The week. Oh my goodness, it has just begun. We started with this outrageous one word. I'm a politician, I can't do one word. Invigorating.
Whoa. Our next panellist is the lone voice of reason in an Auckland mayoralty race that has her up against Wayne Brown, the Mr. Burns of Auckland politics. If there is a God, she will beat him. Auckland mayoralty candidate Kerrin Leoni. Kia ora, comrade.
Kia ora.
Last week, how's it going?
Ooh, we're getting to that end point, but hey, we're fighting right up until Saturday, 12 o'clock. So
Amen.
We know that there's a huge surge of votes in the last week.
There is.
So we're going to be out there on the streets, door knocking, doing everything it takes to let Aucklanders know that it's time for change.
Preach, preach. Our next panellist is the only reason you would buy a subscription to the New Zealand Herald. The man voted at school, most likely to be mistaken for David Slack. Militant cyclist and Auckland visionary NZME columnist Simon Wilson. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome back to the show.
Kia ora.
One word to describe the week, please, sir.
So I'm going to say cowardice, and I'm talking about a government deeply afraid. I wrote down here deeply afraid of change, but it isn't change they're afraid of. You look at what Erica Stanford's doing in education, embracing change. What they're afraid of, I think, is the modern world. We've just heard Helen Clark talking about the desperate need for New Zealand to reorient its thinking about the Middle East. You can see another example today in the Spin-Off. It published a wonderful essay by Marilyn Waring.
Yes.
Talking about 50 years ago when she was in the national government and how those conservative National Party politicians, the men introduced pay equity and equal pay legislation, not understood in the courts until very recently.
Yes.
But she makes the point that they were far more able to grasp the social need, the economic need, and the moral value of what they were doing.
True conservatives,
if you like, than the people today. And then you just mentioned before the so-called energy reform. That is an appalling abrogation of responsibility.
Right.
A real opportunity. It's not just about the exploration. It's also about the ludicrous idea that liquefied natural gas we could spend gazillions getting ready for it, and we probably won't need it. And the lost opportunity of being able to pivot to the future.
Yeah.
This is a government that is scared of the modern world.
And last but certainly not least, our final panelist is quite frankly too good for the show. One of the best and most respected business journalists in New Zealand, property editor at Business Desk, Maria Slade. Kia ora, comrade.
Kia
Always a
ora.
joy to have you on the show.
Oh,
one
you're
word
too kind.
one word to describe the week.
Rant.
Let's hear it.
Winston Peters had a jolly good old rant at you this week, I hear, Bomber. And he had a jolly good old rant on RNZ again this morning. Because he doesn't
Badge of
like
honour.
people throwing rocks through his window and
Yep.
Yeah.
putting glass all over his dog, which I have to say, if that was me, I'd be annoyed as well.
Sure.
But he was on fan form.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get into that at the end of the show. Brothers and sisters, let's get into tonight's show. Issue 1, why isn't the economy recovering? Issue 2, why is the government bashing teenage beneficiaries? And issue 3 tonight, will Apathy win the local elections? Plus, we'll have a final word at the end of the show, which each panellist gets to go to the mountaintop to see who breaches broadcasting standards this week. My money is on David Slack. Comrades, over the week, NZME business editor Liam Dan asked why the economy hasn't recovered like it was supposed to. Despite 250 basis points off the OCR, we have 5.2% unemployment, 5% food inflation, 20% crash in house prices, 210 Kiwis fleeing New Zealand each day, exploding homelessness, hospitals at maximum capacity, and prisons at maximum capacity. Maria, we were promised growth, growth, growth. We've had none. Why hasn't the economy recovered like it was supposed to?
Oh, God, it's such a huge question. Just referring back to Liam Dan's column, actually, and you and I were just talking about this
Yes,
before,
yes.
the economy is in a state of, if we're not in stagflation, we're certainly approaching it or showing signs of it, which is...
Can you tell people what stagflation is?
Well, it basically means when your economy's not growing, but you've still got inflation. And one of the factors that Liam identified that is happening is any kind of relief we're getting from lower interest rates, any of that sort of money that's flowing into the economy is getting eaten up by higher food and veg prices and higher electricity prices.
Insurance.
So that is a problem that we are facing. The housing market, that is going absolutely nowhere and showing no signs of recovering anytime soon.
Yep.
A lot of that you have to remember, though, of course, is we had the most extraordinary boom in the post-COVID era where the Reserve Bank, with hindsight, made a few mistakes.
Sure.
They loosened the LVR restrictions for a start, but possibly the greater thing was the money printing.
Yes.
They thought the economy needed the stimulation. Turns out it didn't. It all flowed into the housing market. We had a massive, great big boom. So we are still recovering from that. So, there's so many factors. It's just not a downturn like we've seen before.
Right. And follow-up question to that. Bernard Hickey argues that the slash and burn policies we saw in the 1991, 1999 and 2008 recessions aren't working this time because households are much more heavily indebted now and find it difficult to leverage up even more. If private debt is too high for households to step up to cover the government's cuts, where will the economic growth come from?
There are a few signs that we've kind of reached the bottom, I suppose.
Yep.
Look, I was just talking to a building products company just today who they make systems for affordable housing. And even though construction is in the absolute doldrums, they're seeing a bit of an uptick.
Right.
So there are a few brighter spots out there. I do write a bit about the construction sector, so it's a bit of a focus. Credit Works came out with their latest construction sector snapshot the other day, and while the news is basically not good, there are signs like the arrears levels are dropping, and the creditworthiness of companies is improving slightly.
Yep.
So it does appear that we've hit the bottom of the trough. Building consents seem to have hit the bottom of their cycle. Although, interestingly I had a managing director of a timber company tell me today that this idea that it's not so bad as it was after the GFC because building consents haven't hit that terrible trough that they did after at that time is not really a true figure because one of the things is that we know 10 to 20% of consents are never built for a start. So you've got to build that in. And also the other thing is that they're building much smaller houses now. Right. So in terms of the construction sector, it's not as good as it looks kind of thing.
Sure.
So, look, I could go on. But I would say we've hopefully reached the bottom.
Steve, critics will point to the vicious cuts to the infrastructure pipeline that National embarked upon in early 2024 that have cascaded through the economy and has seen 70,000 Kiwis leave and entire industries devastated. Has the government short-sightedness and refusal to do anything meaningful about power prices for manufacturing have had more to do with where we are economically than Labour's post-COVID spending?
Yeah, fully. I mean, whatever the impact of the post-COVID spending was, these guys have made everything markedly worse, and they've totally tanked the economy because they've applied an ideological approach which says that you've got to cut fiscal expenditure, the state expenditure, and that somehow if you lay off 10,000 public workers and you stop investing in a whole lot of things, that somehow the economy is going to keep functioning in that situation. And as your previous comment was made, we've got this much bigger household debt than we had historically. So as Bernard Hickey also said, everyone's gone into their shell, and the economy's gone into its shell. But I think the scales are falling off people's eyes in terms of the ideology of neoliberalism, which is that you have this ever shrinking sort of fiscal expenditure. In fact, if we boosted public debt, which is the Green Party plan, to something as radical as 52% of GDP, it's currently about 45% of GDP, we'd still be a long way off what many of our comparable countries have.
Yes.
Whereas we have a comparably large household debt, around 90% of GDP.
That's right.
And the key thing here is that if the state doesn't pay for it, the citizen pays for it.
Right.
So if the state's not paying for your healthcare, your education, for housing, public housing, such that housing becomes affordable across the board because there's a sufficient supply, then you, the citizen, will pay for it. And the thing is, the state can borrow money much more cheaply than you can. So it's better that we have those basic necessities of life, including energy, paid for by public money, because it's a much lower national resilience risk for the state to be in a little bit more debt than for there to be large household debt. Their refusal to deal with the fundamental crisis of the market and the energy sector is unconscionable. Subsequent governments have let the generator retailers rule the roost, sit on their hands, not overbuild the generation that we need to electrify our energy system, our transport, our industry, to get us off our dependency on fossil fuels. And these guys are going in the exact opposite direction, thinking that they're going to invest even more in fossil fuels.
Follow-up question. The solution the government have offered is allowing 200 gold visa holders to buy citizenship and purchase houses worth $5 million. How will rich people buying houses off other rich people help Kiwis? Walk me through it.
Exactly. I mean, that is just isn't it the most ridiculous idea that's somehow, and the idea that it won't affect house prices overall. It's going to actually have this effect on if those top end houses become, there's a whole new market for them now that increases the value of those houses. That's going to push up everything else as well. And so it doesn't actually solve the basic housing supply problem. It doesn't treat housing as a public necessity, a common good.
Although we have actually overbuilt houses at the moment.
We are overbuilding at the moment,
particularly
but not
in
the right
Auckland.
houses. Kerrin, Heart of the City released a scathing survey this week that found store owners and officers believing homelessness, too few police, neglect and disorder, and frightening antisocial behaviour are crippling their trade. When you underfund the outreach and safety nets, people fall over. And we see that social failure all over the CBD. By ignoring mental health, poverty and homelessness, how can businesses flourish?
Look, I've got huge concerns about that too, because we know that central government have just funded a $20 million cover over some tennis courts, and then you kind of compare what's happening on our streets, and where some of that money could have gone to actually address these huge issues for our city. I was walking down Queen Street the other night, and I have to say, there's no way that you can ignore that it has increased, the homelessness in the city centre.
Auckland has been my home for 30 years. I've lived a lot of it in the central city. I've never seen it as bad as this.
And I used to work for the City Mission.
Yep,
I worked for the City Mission 20 years ago, and it's at a point now where it's so severe that I think people's safety and all those issues are coming up. But actually, where's the leadership in this to address it? Where's the leadership to say, let's sit down at the table and even look at $5 million to go towards putting a support plan together to really work with the existing organisations and maybe some other organisations in the private sector that might want to help. But we're not even sitting at the table to address or come up with a plan. It's just like, well, let's just ignore that, shall we? And it's not good enough.
Follow-up question. This government have cut food services to Auckland City Mission, cut outreach programs for the homeless, and made emergency housing more difficult to obtain. What would you do as mayor to solve that?
Well, like I said, it's all about sitting down at the table. We have a lot of people in Auckland who are concerned about homelessness in the city. And as I say, when I worked at the City Mission, we used to have a lot of organisations that would come in and they'd want to actually come up with a plan to address this.
People want to help, right?
People actually do want to help.
Right.
But if there's no leadership there to move that forward, then it just makes it really difficult. And I do want to bring up the fact that Auckland Council does have a number of buildings that are empty across our city,
right,
that we haven't had the money to obviously put into them for maintenance. But imagine if we did actually partner with some of these organisations. And we know in West Auckland there's a number of empty properties that are just sitting there, doing nothing, needs a couple of million to do them up. We could be working together in partnership to address this issue.
Simon, we still have one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the OECD. Isn't it time to invest and build the infrastructure to support the extra 2 million we want to cram into Auckland?
Oh, absolutely it is. And I also want to say, Bomber, that Kerrin just took half my talking points.
See, you guys get along.
And I want to say, because Kerrin and I have been disputing a few things in the last few days.
Sure, but you're both on the same page.
But we're absolutely on the same page on this. And the tennis court is a classic example.
Right.
The Prime Minister came up here to announce, what was it, a $12 million project, as if that's going to make a difference to anything, in a city where, as you've said, there is unprecedented levels of people sleeping rough on the streets, shopkeepers complaining, the number of closed shops is high, and on it goes. And when you look at the fact that the construction industry was collapsed, that has flow-on effects.
Totally.
Not just the number of houses, it's social housing, emergency housing. I talked to the City Mission today. I talked to Helen Robinson, and she told me that
Great
they
woman.
are...
Great woman.
Yes, she is. And she told me how grateful they are that the government has put more money into emergency housing support, and it's through agencies like hers. But it's not nearly enough, is the point she made. There needs to be much more. Now, that's going to involve the council, as well as the government, which means everybody, and I'm sorry, Kerrin, everybody who's arguing our rates should be lower than they are needs to rethink. We need to spend money. Businesses in Queen Street need to understand that money needs to be spent to fix this problem, and it will need to come from council. And I've written about this in the Herald tomorrow. Yes. How did you know that?
No, because you are amazing. That's why I have you on it.
I have one of the things I've said is that there needs to be a program of no empty shops. These shop landlords are members, most of them are members of the Heart of the City, the Business Association. If there was a real program using carrots and sticks with landlords to ensure no shop was empty, we would have a thriving and safer and better central city.
Preach.
That is where it starts. If your shops are empty, everything else goes backwards.
That's such a good point.
And it isn't hard to understand that, in my view. It is hard to fix it, but it is fixable. And we need to have a proper campaign approach to making it.
Follow-up question, I look forward to reading that. Auckland mayoral candidates were asked to commit the council to increasing wages and supporting homeless into affordable housing, but Mayor Wayne Brown said he wouldn't be picking up the bill for central government. If the Auckland mayor won't do anything. How does the problem get solved?
Well, the Auckland Mayor, Wayne Brown, has supported living wage.
Yes.
The extent to which he's prepared to accept that the council has a role in those other issues, that is important. But I'm not sure that any of the mayoral candidates would say that it's a role for the council, except one or two minor ones.
Quick round. Will the country be in technical recession by the end of the year, Maria?
Look, it's so hard to say because they're saying that the numbers go all over the place and this quarter may negate last quarter. So, we may actually see a rise. So I would say no, actually.
Steve, technical recession? Oh, we've lost him. Has he gone mute? What's going on there?
I'm sparing you. Year to date is Q2 25 growth rate minus 1.1%. So
You think it'll technical recession?
And but I don't know if it's quite the right question, but who knows? I'm not going to be a crystal ball gazer on the economy in terms of that.
Kerrin?
If we keep going the way we are, then we will, but I hope not.
Simon?
I think the look you see in the eyes of Minister of Finance, Prime Minister, other senior politicians is something ranging from panic to fear. And people who are full of panic and fear are not going to behave rationally. So chances are.
Comrades, we need to move on to
that's
issue...
right. You can sense that in the House.
Yeah. We need to move on to issue 2 tonight, and it's the government's new Get Tough on Teenage Beneficiaries. The polls aren't looking good for National when they're reduced to bashing the dirty, filthy bennies. Steve, how does removing the jobless benefit from 4,300 unemployed 18 to 19-year-olds and making them stay or return home to be supported by parents on less than $65,000 a year going to help any single one of them find a job?
It's la la land, isn't it? I mean, it's demonstrated exactly how disconnected Luxon is from what it's like for your average person in the street in terms of how they're dealing with this cost of living crisis. It's the opposite of what you need to be doing to engender confidence in a younger generation of people who are literally, choosing the airline and flying to Australia. I mean, it's absolutely nuts.
Follow-up question, what should the government be doing instead of bashing beneficiaries?
I mean, supporting beneficiaries. It's simple. Like any economic model you look at where you actually take care of people who are struggling or in need, and you develop pathways such as our workforce strategy, where we take young people and say, hey, this is the sort of workforce we want to have over the next 10, 20, 30 years. This is the sort of work you could be getting into, and we support it at a public level. And that's what we used to do. It's not a particularly radical idea.
Right.
It's kind of, and that's what you should be doing instead of just going, get the hell down to the back of Beyond and see if you can pick some fruit, when there's actually no fruit picking jobs anyway. All those small communities saying, no, there's no jobs here.
Right. Kerrin,
And
there are
so
216...
totally out of touch.
Kerrin, there are 216,000 people on job seeker benefits and only 10,442 jobs open around the country. With 15,000 18 to 19-year-olds on job seeker, where on earth are they supposed to get jobs while competing against older job seekers?
Yeah, no, look, I agree with the comments that have been made. Look, I think there should be a responsibility here that we do. Actually, this is something that central and local government could work together on, and that could be to look at providing young people work experience. We are the second biggest organisation in the city.
Yeah.
And, I would say that most of the jobs that we could provide or work experience, whether that be in the environmental sector, there's so many things that we could be doing in that space to be supporting young people get a step up and be working in partnership. And it's not always about it actually costing a lot of money to do that, because young people want that work experience to put on their CV. And we know that happens with other local governments around the world. So why can't can't we be doing that here in Auckland, the biggest city, the second biggest organisation that can provide that? And at least I would go as far to say that we could also bring back, the hostels that we used to have years ago, where young people would get that work experience, there'd be that wraparound service and support, and you look at the economic value that brings to the city long term. It's not a huge cost. We know that we've got empty buildings that the council owns, so that's another opportunity that we could be working together, see good outcomes for our young people, and actually provide a stepping stone, because we've got uni students that cannot get a job.
Follow-up question. Unemployment is 6.2% in Auckland, 11.5% for Māori living in Auckland. IKEA received more than 25,000 applicants for 500 positions at its new Auckland megastore. Doesn't that level of desperation make the Prime Minister's comments just look completely out of touch?
Absolutely out of touch. And that's why we need change.
Preach.
we need change in all areas. We need to bring some hope back to the city and come up with some solutions to take our city forward and the country forward. We should be leading the way for the rest of the country and providing these solutions, rather than just doing nothing and sitting on our hands and saying, we're just focusing on infrastructure. But we've got the resources to actually come up with some great plans to take our city forward, and that's what we should be doing.
Simon, the Prime Minister said, if you want a job, you go where the jobs are. I encourage anyone to do what it takes to get a job. They are doing that, and 210 are fleeing to Australia every day. How is that a positive outcome?
Well, it's not, and you would think that the government would be especially worried about that statistic.
Right.
Because the people we're losing, the number and the quality of the people we're losing is going to have long-term disadvantage for the country. It's quite obvious.
The Prime Minister told job seekers to go to Christchurch, Dargaville and the Hawke's Bay to get jobs. But the Kaipara district, which includes Dargaville, only had 16 vacancies listed on Trade Me in early October. Again, is this a well-thought-out policy or a political stunt?
Well, it is a political stunt, and it isn't just about young people. It's also about their families. If you're telling the families of 18 and 19-year-olds you're going to have to pay for the kid who's left school and can't find a job, if you're earning anything more than $65,000 a year as a household, that is not a lot of money.
Right.
That really is not a lot of money at all. So if you're thinking about a 5-person family with one person like that, and maybe the second kid's coming into that situation,
right,
that is not a great. It's just shocking. The
Maria,
pressure that puts on people that really simply the government knows won't vote for them.
Maria, bashing these teenage beneficiaries and cutting them off our welfare will only save $39 million per year. This isn't a real social policy, is it? This is a revenge fantasy masquerading as social policy, isn't it?
Oh, it's virtue signalling to their voter base, the centre-right voter base, that's for sure. The couple of things struck me. One is that they said that if a young person was estranged from their family, had been kicked out of home, whatever, they would still be able to get the job seeker benefit. But then they've got to go through that whole process of assessing that case. And if they're going to do that, why are they not assessing the cases of these young people who are struggling to get into employment or training? Because I think there's a whole lot of other things going on there. Like, for example, a family member is a training advisor in the apprenticeship scheme. He had 2 apprentices get kicked out of their jobs in this last week because they were refusing to do their work, to do their study and perform at work, and the bosses just had enough with them and got rid of these 2 young men. So what's going on for those young people that they can't see the value in sticking with an apprenticeship and getting a trade? I think a lot of them are affected from all the COVID lockdowns still, that generation. We've got that, there's just so much going on.
All of that, that's right. Look, Luxon's advice to the 15,000 teenagers on the job seeker benefit was the world doesn't owe you a living. Okay. But surely he's responsible for crashing the economy and tanking the jobs they can't find. Why are the teenagers responsible, but he isn't?
Yeah, there's no sense in this policy. I think you'd have to be fairly extremely right-wing in your thinking to believe that this was an actual sensible economic policy.
Yeah.
We've always had a huge challenge with the NEETs, the not in education, employment or training, and it's not getting any better. And there's just such a mismatch in the kids that are coming out of school and the jobs that are available. We've got a lot of problems with they are reforming NCEA, and that would
All
appear
of
to be
that, yep.
overdue. So yeah, there's just so many other factors going on as to why we're producing young people that aren't fit for the job market.
Doesn't it go also to that question that I mentioned before about being scared of the modern world? We know that the job market, employment is going to be changing much more radically than we've experienced so far, and already those changes are hard enough. And so the idea, actually, you can solve those problems, you can prepare people for the future by telling them go where the jobs are and toughen up and all of the stuff that Luxon's been talking about. It's nonsensical. It creates an economy and a people who are incapable of facing the future rather than helping them, just as Maria was saying.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight, and with the local council elections this week, will Apathy be the winner? Kerrin, you're an Auckland mayoralty candidate. How has your experience been this election?
Well, it's when I look back at it now, I just think to myself, my goodness, we're at the end. Look, I think for Aucklanders, the most difficult thing is when we are out there on the campaign trail, most Aucklanders do not even know there's an election happening.
Wow.
And I think that's the worst part for me, is that normally you would have that mainstream media on TV and you'd have the debates to let Aucklanders know that actually there's a number of candidates, not just our incumbent, and even with the poll that he did do, it identified 3 of us. Okay, I might have been a lot lower on that poll, but it still should show that there are 3 people that are going for that job that have been polled as the 3 highest. So these are who you've got to choose from. Yeah. Right now, what we're hearing is we don't even know there's an election happening. I mean, obviously, we've looked at the numbers, though. I think we're only about 2% behind, but I'm talking about, people that are in South Auckland and West Auckland that would normally at least have an idea through the news and through TV shows and things like that there's an election happening. But besides the billboards being up, that's the feedback that we're getting. Because, you get so many Aucklanders, they don't read the news, they don't go listen to RNZ, they don't listen to any of those things. So they rely on that hype that comes through on TV, unfortunately, of the elections. And we have to do better. We need to cut this postal voting. It's ridiculous. People move house all the time. Yes. And half of them still don't know what the orange envelope is. I know I'm always told by Ivy that it's orange, not yellow. But we have to pull that up. We're having to do videos and show Aucklanders, hey, we're in the middle of an election. Get your vote out. The special vote, it's just, we need to just totally move with the times, get to online voting and get better education around local government elections.
Preach. Simon, Wayne Brown told the Auckland Ratepayers Association and Taxpayers Union to F off over
Can we not say
the
the word?
rates cap.
Are we not allowed to say the word?
Is that a message that all Aucklanders can get around?
Oh, totally. And that is the other thing I've written about in the paper tomorrow. I think Kerrin is partly right about this. It is appalling the way in which the democratic process has been so badly served in this election.
Yeah.
There's a number of culprits. The media, my organisation, I have to say, is one of them. Stuff and NZME have both closed down local newspapers in recent years. They are places where there used to be a lot of local candidate information. And that is not happening anymore. The big media organisations that closed them down didn't replace it. We used to do ward analysis.
That's right.
We haven't done any of that this year. And I'll tell you the reason for it. The reason is we don't believe anyone reads it. And we have, because we're a digital-first organisation like most media, we track everything. We know what people read, and we know how long they spend reading it and all of that, and we know that these things are not being well read. So it's a vicious circle that feeds itself. So that is a part of the problem. Another part of the problem, Wayne Brown not turning up to candidate meetings has suppressed the vote, in my view. He is not the only one. Kerrin, you know that you have missed some yourself. It is a problem for the whole election. And then on top of that, again, it has been very hard to see how the major issues have got traction in the public debate, and that's a problem.
Maria, the Taxpayers Union have spent an enormous amount of money running a rates cap agenda, and Hobson's Pledge has run an anti-Māori wards campaign. How will they impact the final result, and will that help or hinder local democracy?
Oh, I suppose you could argue it might get people out to vote at least if they feel strongly about something.
Right.
But I think, just going back to Simon's point about the media, you need to blame the metas of this world for decimating
That's true. I didn't get to them.
The old media model where time was when you wrote a story, flogged a few ads around it and away you went. Now it's a whole lot more complicated than that, which is why a lot of that local government reporting has disappeared. But look, there was a great piece of journalism the other day by Stuff reporter Paula Penfold about Waitemata local board candidate Nick Nielsen, about how he was all about transparency apparently, but turns out he's a bigamist.
Wow. Wow.
But a great story. Great story.
You can't be
I
a
do not
bigamist
live in the
unless you've concealed something.
I do not live in the Waitemata local board, but I have to say that would put me off. But it's behind the paywall.
Yeah.
So again, it's that issue of access, as Kerrin says, to that information, and I guess that's where social media's got to fill the gap. Those in local government and so forth need to make more use of the channels that are reaching people.
Well, those social media channels are really active, and I think those of us working in mainstream media are not very good yet at working out how to comment on that, how to analyse it, how to present it, because Kerrin will know this, you get really active on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is you use, and that gets you to a lot of people, and we struggle to catch up.
Steve, you are in Wellington a lot. Why has the Mayoralty campaign been so toxic?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I haven't been following it. I've seen the bits and pieces of it. I guess it began with some scurrilous comment made by candidates against others.
Yeah.
Toxic candidates, let's just say it.
Wellington Council. I think they get probably too much media coverage, the Wellington Council, because there's so many journalists down in Wellington. But yeah, it's interesting. And to the broader question of the apathy factor, I was down in Whakatane for the Battle of Tarata commemorations on the weekend, and it was fascinating thinking that there's a population that's a big tangata whenua Māori population, but getting out the vote is a real challenge, and the political power that population could have if there was a high amount of enfranchisement is huge. And that's kind of the same challenge we have in Auckland, like if you look, Zane Wedding, I've been watching his posts about tracking the vote, and it's, it was looking okay. It's getting there. It's still exceedingly low, but it's better than what it was 3 years ago. But you think about, I see him sort of tearing his hair out, thinking about, my goodness, if all of you got out and voted, we could have a different mayor. We could have a different council.
But he's probably the first one to do that, would you say, Steve? I haven't seen that in previous elections before where we've had someone, who's been able to do that work behind the scenes, because sometimes I think to myself, oh my gosh, he's actually doing a really great campaign for local government, to get the vote out for Māori, and people that are really interested in Māori wards. So, I think that's the way that we have to move with the times at how we can connect with voters.
Comrades, we need to wrap the show with a final word. Kerrin, your final word this week is?
Well, it's always been get out the vote, but of course I'm going to say time for change.
Amen.
Time for change for this election. This is your opportunity to have someone who is going to represent all Aucklanders, that wants to see that change, that also wants to make sure that we work in partnership right across our city and get the best for Auckland.
Good luck, comrades. Simon, your final word this week, please, sir.
My final word is that I think there's a feeling in Auckland that the mayoral race is kind of a done deal or whatever. And I'm sorry, Kerrin, I'm sure a lot of people do think that. Yeah. Whether or not people think that, it's still worth considering how you're going to vote for mayoralty, but more also, really importantly, for the wards and for the local boards, there are a lot of very significant issues that will affect people's lives enormously. Yeah. And whether it's the size of the rates, or whether it's the rubbish, or whether it's the way in which the central city's cleaned up, or whether it's housing or public transport, all of those things. So those things are really worth voting about. And my only word would be, when you look at what people are saying, if they're promising you that it can all be done with lesser or lower rates than the kind of moderate increases we have now, they are fantasists. Look past them and find people who are not fantasists.
Preach. Maria, your final word.
Well, this is a central government issue, and it's something I've written about tomorrow in Business Desk, and it's the sort of thing that gets absolutely no attention, and our current politicians are not interested in the slightest. But I have written a story about a man who's been bankrupt for 8 years because he has not met his obligations under the bankruptcy regime. The official assignee does not follow up, pretty much, it would seem. And so this person has been running around the business community creating mayhem by the sounds of it. And nobody knew that he was bankrupt because who goes around looking at the insolvency register?
Sure.
So there's things like that in our business law that need looking at, that need tightening, that just don't ever get a look in. And, you know, the consequences can be quite severe. And yet it's not a vote getter, so current politicians don't look at it. So there's my rant.
Real
for today.
journalism, real journalism. Steve, your final word this week, please, sir.
Listen, this might be an unexpected one, but I strongly feel we must not ever take for granted the fact we live in a relatively peaceful nation.
Yeah.
And part of that is the way that we do politics. And it's important that we have the ability to fiercely disagree with someone politically, but not come to blows over it. And we shouldn't take it for granted that we have that as a general tradition in this country, and we should uphold it.
Well said, Steve.
Well said, well said. Thank you, comrades. And now to my final word. Brothers and sisters, tonight I would like to issue an apology to Matua Winston Peters. Over the weekend, I wrote a blog on the Daily Blog arguing that when it comes to genocide, the front line for protest is everywhere. And I defended people protesting outside his house and made a throwaway line about people spitting in Matua Winston's food, which created 3 responses. The first was a deluge of poorly spelt death threats from New Zealand First supporters, which I wasn't too concerned about because most looked like they were in their 80s and I felt I could walk them, and I could outwalk them if they chased me. The second response was Sean Plunkett calling me every hour demanding I appear on his radioactive hate troll farm so he could adjudicate the standards of my comment. I know Sean is watching, so hi Sean. No, I have no interest whatsoever appearing on your radioactive hate troll farm so that you can pass judgment on my comments, because in the past, Sean has attempted to claim images of starving Gazans were faked, has claimed Maui dolphins were the, and I quote, Down syndrome kids of marine mammals that deserve to die, has asked if anyone felt sorry for Harvey Weinstein, and infamously claimed he was concerned about a mass outbreak of anorexia in Gaza. Allowing Sean Plunkett to pass judgment on standards is like having a panel of lepers judge a beauty contest. The third response to my comment about spitting in Winston's food drew a Trumpian rant from Winston himself, where he compared me to political violence on par with Charlie Kirk's assassin, and he called me Bummer Bradbury 5 times. Comrades, while I certainly have a fine ass, I'm not sure I want the attention of Winston Peters on it, and can I remind everyone who has seen his rant that this is the Foreign Minister of New Zealand getting into a mudslinging fight with a left-wing blogger. My original post had 640 views. Him quoting me has had 100,000. So if anything does happen, it's his amplification and personal abuse that will have caused it, not me. I suppose for a man who has had more free lunches in the Southern Hemisphere than Shane Jones, the idea some underpaid Gen Z hospo staff might spit in his soup has turned Matua Winston into an easily triggered snowflake wallowing in victimhood. This is a man who has built a political career out of dog whistle personal attacks on minorities, migrants and vulnerable groups. Remember what he said about Benjamin Doyle, Rawati's facial tattoos, Harry Tam, migrant Green MPs, more than any other politician in recent years. Winston thrives on exploiting community division for political gain. For him to play the victim is like the Taliban demanding to see the manager. But be that as it may, I apologise to Winston for my comments that saw him write a deplorable personalised attack on me in a way that even Donald Trump would consider went a bit too far. He called me a fat retard, for crying out loud. Don't spit in Winston's food, but I do think you can fart in his presence. That's right, folks. I've gone from spitter to farter. Comrades, this is not about what I wrote. This is not about protesters outside his home. It's not even about the smashed window, which, let's be clear, was wrong and unacceptable, and the person who did that will face the law. This is about Winston and the government he is part of putting us on the side of war criminals and genocide. That is what is truly unforgivable. Of course, in any normal situation, we shouldn't protest outside politicians' homes. But when it comes to genocide, the front line for protest is everywhere. Winston put the Palestinians last, New Zealand second to last, and Israel first. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Aotearoa News. After the show, the